Introducing Wrist Time. Uncover your own behaviors, trends, and preferences, experiencing your collection in a new way. Log specific dates, activities, and adventures with your watches. Gain collection insights with your personal wear metrics and discover trends within our global community of 1916 Company collectors, destined to become your newest habit. Download the 1916 Company app and its new features to start tracking today. Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company coming to you from our brand new showroom in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, in this series, every collector has had a passion and every watch has had a story to tell. But today, we get to see the highest evolution of the collection in the hands of an experienced, passionate veteran of the collector's avocation. Today, we're skipping the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. We're going straight to the Space Age. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here.
So now, this is clearly a highly refined and advanced collection. There's nothing here that I would consider to be an entry watch or a starter watch. There's a lot of exit watches. So take me back before Ludovic, Ballouard, Romain Gauthier, Moser, and Ferdinand Berthoud. Where did your passion start with watches?
I've always liked mechanical machines. Well, cars was where I started, and the evolution between cars and watches is very similar. They're machines.
You wear one, the other one wears you, I guess you could say.
Exactly. Well, I've always worn a watch, so I started off obviously as a kid wearing Seikos and Timexes. My grandmother would give me one for my birthday and for Christmas. And I used to skateboard in the park. And the funny thing was about it, somebody called me and said, "Oh, there's a picture of you in the park." And then my friend said, "No, it's not him because he doesn't have a watch on." So I used to wear swatches when I went skateboarding and stuff like that. I just have always been into watches. I just never really put a full-time twist on it.
So when you were really young, a relative would take you into like a department store or a drugstore, and you do what we all did. You'd turn little revolving carriage of Timex, Casio, and Armatron, and you'd pick one out?
Exactly, exactly. But at that time, actually, when I was in my early 20s, I was more into, I've always had a watch. I've always had a watch, and I've always had a couple watches. But I was into cars then. So I was always looking for the next best car. And living in Manhattan was tough to have multiple cars. Because, for me, I'm a little bit crazy with the, I guess you call it particular, whatever you want to call it. I don't want the cars damaged, so...
You were in the wrong place for that.
Exactly. And then when I moved out of New York City, I moved to a place in Connecticut where I could store the cars. But I figured, I got to put license plates on them, I got to pay for them, I got to pay insurance on them, I got to pay registration. And I just look at them. Because I never would drive them. I'd be scared like an acorn's going to fall off a tree and do something, or
some kid's going to hit the door, someone's going to throw it open in a parking lot.
A dog comes up and scratches the side because he wants to say hi, that kind of stuff. So I have one car now, but I got into the watches, and I went all into watches.
And I could see that, because we've often said, and this goes back to the watch you want days, that the car has to stop at the curb. The watch goes into the boardroom, the bedroom, the restaurant. It goes where you go. And I guess if you want to have a micro machine and take your engine with you, you got more flexibility with a watch. Plus, look, we got 10 beautiful watches here. How big a garage would you need for 10 cars, right?
Exactly. Well, the other thing was, so I started in the older days. At the time there was no such thing as a hype watch. It was kind of just.
And we're talking about the 90s, right?
Yeah, the 90s. Well, I'm 60 now, and it's 225. So we were talking about when I was in my 20s. So maybe in the 80s.
Okay.
I had a passion for Rolex. I went to a small guy up in Hartford who sold a brand called Audemars Piguet, which at the time, nobody really knew much about them.
So you're into Rolex at this point?
Yes, I'm really into Rolex. I had my favorite watch, because my friend had one, was the two-tone Submariner. He had the blue dial, but I could only find a black dial. And we'd wear it when we went out at night to the bars and stuff. So that was fun.
So you started to look into the high horology pieces. When you looked, what did you find?
Well, actually, I got introduced to Roger Dubuis at that day. And that was my first step into complicated, what they call dress watches. I don't look at any watch, because I don't dress up. So
Nor do I.
So,
this is the exception.
When I wear a watch, it's going to be, you could call it a dress watch, but I'm not dressing up for the watch. So I guess it's just a watch. But the term dress watch would be this particular Roger Dubuis was the most money that I'd ever fathomed spending on a watch. And I think it was like $35,000. And I was getting told by my family, you're out of your mind, you're crazy, the watches shouldn't cost that much
Your family,
money.
by the way, they enjoy collecting art, so they're
Yes.
not innocent either.
No, they're not innocent. They collect art and houses and decorate them finely.
So now you discovered Roger Dubuis, and now you start to say, well, look, this costs a lot now because we're not talking about a brand name that everyone knows, because no one knows Roger Dubuis.
Right, well, at that point, I wasn't doing my homework on the brand itself. Like, I don't know the history of Roger Dubuis himself and what kind of watchmaker it was. I was looking at it as it was a retrograde watch. It had really fine details, like the hands were beautiful. The mechanism was beautiful. The finishing on the watch was beautiful. And at that time, open backs were something of a rarity. So when the open back came around, I went a different direction.
And that makes sense. People don't realize that open casebacks, where you could see the watch, were not common until the second half of the 90s and not universal until the early 2000s. So you sort of discovered maybe three different things at once. Watches outside the mainstream, the beauty of the movement, the beauty of the visible movement, and also smaller brands. Mm-hmm. So that sort of takes us on a glide path to where we are right here. When did you begin moving in the direction of watches that are really best described as smaller manufacturers, often the name on the dial being the man behind the watch?
When I wasn't worried about my satellite of people around me cared about. It takes, I'm going to use the word guts, to go out and buy a watch like these watches that are
yeah, and we've all made that leap of faith.
And I've always said to my friends, and this is today, if you go to New York City, you better watch your back. But if I have a Ferdinand Berthoud FB1 on my wrist, I could tell them I got it in China and they'll just leave me alone.
Hey, nice watch, dude. What did that cost? Oh, $1,000. Oh, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. You don't want this one. You can't get rid of it. It's nothing. But that was the thing. Nobody was really understood them. I started to get a little more knowledgeable and realized that I still have an artist's eye, even though, like my brother, he has a room in his apartment that he calls a man cave, and it's basically a couch with a bottle of vodka and a picture on the wall.
That is the most spare and restrained man cave I've ever heard of.
I wouldn't call it a man cave at all, but that's what he's into. He could sit there and just drink a vodka and look at this picture. To me, I'm ADD, hyper, all these things. I would get bored in 10 minutes. And one thing about watches is there's always going to be some movement somewhere. I used to also shop at a store called Cellini in New York, and the store was right below my dentist in Manhattan. So I'd always see the watches before I went to the dentist, and I'd come down. And then I went into the store, and they sold all these independent brands that in the old days nobody knew about, like Richard Mille and all these things. And I bought my first watch I bought from them was a Chopard Milli.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
The racing-themed chronograph.
Because I thought it was cool because it had a rubber strap that looked like a tire tread on it.
So now you've kind of gone beyond, at least the mainstream as brands are concerned.
Yes, right.
And I need to know how we get to the watches here on the table now.
Okay.
So let's start with what could unarguably be called the most mainstream brand you've got, which is anything but mainstream. We've got King Creamsicle here, a 100-piece from Geo. This is the vintage 70s chronograph panorama date. Okay, tell me a little bit about what this watch means to you.
So for me, the thing about that watch is, number one, it's a summery dial color. It doesn't mean that it just happens to be one of 100, just the dial color, but the shape of the case, the squareness. They say it's a TV case. I like the shape of the case. I like the solidity of the the bracelet, the combination of the bracelet, and it has a big date. I can read it.
And it's fun because it is an integrated bracelet sports watch that's not trying to be a Royal Oak, not trying to be a Nautilus, doesn't look generic in any way.
Oh, I think too many of my friends are wrapped up in what social media is going to say about what they have on. I couldn't care less. I'm not on any social media site. I'm spending my money and collecting my watches because I like these watches. And that watch, I mean, most of my friends would say it's too thick. It's a Glashütte. Who buys Glashüttes? That's a very fine German watch. The bracelet on that watch, the adjustments, there's just little things that are great about it.
It's a very smart, very refined watch.
When I go to the beach in the summer, I want to wear something that I don't have to worry about. And then that watch, I don't worry about that watch.
And that watch you don't have to worry about. It could have been a Rolex, Omega. It could have been anything from the mainstream makers for a similar price, but you went with Geo and you went with orange.
Right. Because I went for number one, the orange. I like that orange. You know, and that's another thing. You know, when you know, with cars and it's what color car do you like? You know, when I was a kid, it was all black cars. Black cars were the only cars to get. I find now with my OCD, I can't take the swirl marks on the side of a black car. I like grays and pastels now. So the eye changes with time, with the watches, and so. You know, a lot of things changed with these aspects of them.
Let's talk about that because this is independent. This is three-dimensional. We got another little echo of the orange or autumn colors that you favor.
Right.
But tell me about what makes this watch so special to you, because there's a man on the dial who's very important, and there's a lot of visual interest on the depth of this dial.
Well, let's say so. So this watch is, they have what they call an Evo, which is their sport model of this watch. And every watch this guy makes, like this is a stainless steel case with the salmon dial. I want that dial color.
Yes.
Okay. If I want a green dial, I got to go to a different. I can't buy that watch. So the Evo has black indices.
Yes.
I want the enamel indices in white. I mean
So you want legacy machine, perpetual, non-Evo stainless steel.
I mean, the Evo is nice because it's a sportier watch. It might be better for sportier, but I'm not buying it for that. I'm buying it for the aesthetic of the watch. And the thing I love about this, the number one, is that it's the movement of that heartbeat in the middle. Yeah. And the three-dimensional, I personally take that out of my watch box and I can look at that watch for an hour at a time, just looking at different angles, different shapes.
It's beguiling.
It's great. And the other thing about this particular watch, I love complicated dials. Some people like clean dials. I mean, I have a lot of different dials here. I have clean and I have complicated. But if it's complicated, it's got to be balanced.
Which it is.
Okay, this one, because take the 101, which is a smaller watch. It has a beautiful dial, most of them, and the dials are obviously shaped by the different case, but it's not balanced.
The subdials are off-centered.
Yeah, it's not balanced. They make one, the split escapement is a beautiful balanced dial. So that was part of that thing. And also this watch, I've always loved perpetual calendars because they present, like I like a traditional Patek perpetual calendar because it's got 3 circles, it's beautiful, but like I go to these watch shows sometimes and these guys will wear vintage watches. They're not even set. They're not even working. I have to have mine working and I have to have them set. So the ease of setting this particular perpetual calendar is for a guy with a little tremor and doesn't want to stick things in the side of the case to possibly scratch the case. The ease at which to set this watch is amazing.
Yeah, buttons, no tools necessary.
Right. It's also a manual perpetual calendar. A lot of perpetual calendars are not manuals.
And I like the fact that it is manual and it does give you a power reserve indicator because for whatever reason, I find that when I'm wearing automatic watches, they often stop at unexpected times.
Yes.
And when I've got a manual one watch, especially with a power reserve indicator, I know that if I do my part every morning, it's never going to stop. I'm not going to wake up and see, oh, this stopped at 2:37 a.m. and now I got to reset everything.
Right.
So I know exactly what you mean.
I've always thought watches should have a little breathing time. They should work and then they should be set aside for a little bit of time. Relax and then start them up again. So with this one, I can let it go down and I can reset it very easily with those pushers. The balance and the indicators at the bottom, one's a power reserve and one's a leap year indicator, and they're so perfectly aligned. And the issue that some people would have with that watch is it's a thick watch, but it fits under my cuff.
And your wrist is the same size as mine.
Right. I've got a 6 3/4, 7-inch wrist. Let's say you use millimeters, a 16 millimeter watch, and that's another thing about collecting. It's like, how do you get the right wrist size? I've done so many tests. I could put a string around here and come up with 5 different sizes.
Is that why you eventually I guess you moved towards watches on straps rather than bracelets?
Well, the strap thing, it was by nature of the beast. To get the watch, you had to get it with a strap. I mean, they just don't.
Ludovic Ballouard doesn't make a bracelet.
Right. I mean, these watches, I guess you could consider them, some of them sport watches or dress watches. But like most of these manufacturers, except for Glashütte, I think, started off as dress watches. They never really had a sport watch, an integrated sports watch, which is where all the hype is now.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could easily say that of Urwerk, of Ferrier, of Ballouard, of Ferdinand Berthoud, of Moser, of Grönefeld. All of them were dress watchmakers.
I mean, this to me is a sport watch. And what does sport watch mean?
Yeah, let's talk about this because you got really strong feelings about dress watches and sport watches and how they're qualified.
Right.
So what is a sports watch and what is a dress watch?
A sport watch is a watch, to me, that is just sporty looking. To me, the perfect dress watch is a Calatrava. A simple Calatrava with 2 hands, a nice champagne dial, and no wording at all but Patek Philippe written there.
And I do think this kind of versatility of the watch that is not designed for a tuxedo expands the scope of what we consider a sports watch. There used to be definitions like a tool watch, or it has a professional application, or a certain amount of water resistance. But if you think of like a sport blazer, something you would wear that would be acceptable in polite company, but also at a game, that is not considered to be sporting attire. You're not going to sweat in it, but it's versatile. So we've got sort of like this definition that you've developed of the sports watch being something that's very versatile.
Right, exactly. And the other thing about it is, it's like, take the Calatrava for instance. I only associate that Calatrava with a tuxedo. And even if you are the most social of social people, how many times are you going in a tuxedo in 1 year? I mean,
I tell people I don't dress up to wear my watch. I wear a platinum watch with shorts and a t-shirt.
And I also am not one of these guys who goes like, well, it's an orange dial, I gotta have something orange on. So to me, they gotta look sporty. This looks like a sports car. The only thing that doesn't make it, quote, a sport watch is it's got 30-meter water resistance, which I don't know if everybody out there knows what 30 meters means in reality. It doesn't mean the depth of 30 meters.
You're not snorkeling with this.
Right.
And I understand that. I think that's a good way of looking at a sports watch. Maybe a sports watch is now what we used to call kind of an all-arounder.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be something that's anti-magnetic or for pilots or only for racing cars. It's just something that can go from very casual to quite formal, with maybe the margins, the super formal and the super sporty being where you would put something like a Submariner or a hobnail bezel Calatrava. Because most people just don't want to get in a bathing suit or, for that matter, a business suit to wear their watch.
Right.
They want to wear it all the time.
And yes, I do the term tool watch doesn't mean the derogatory term your tool. It means it's for a function other than keeping time. For me, they have to be cool watches. Let's just say that, cool. Like, they have to add something that's like, wow, that's pretty cool. And every one of these watches adds a little bit of cool, whether it's the dial color, the hand shape, the shape of the case. Something's got to be cool in them.
So tell me, what's cool with this Urwerk UR-120 Spock?
Oh, the whole function of so my number one, I find that watch pretty easy to read, but a lot of people are like, how do you read that watch? Well, there's a big number there, and then you have the indicator of the minutes on the side.
Yeah, there you go, 9, and it's pointing at a number. That's the time.
It's the transfer of the numbers that's pretty interesting. So each one of these things rotates like this, and Martin Freed, the owner of the company, he wanted to make his watches a little thinner. So in the old days, each one of these blocks was a single number, or a single block with four.
It was basically like a
four numbers.
Yeah, like a big rectangular prism that would rotate.
Right. So now to keep the watch thinner, he came up with the mechanism of splitting the number between two discs.
It's almost like you built up a little building out of blocks and you disassemble the building except when it's displaying the time.
Right. And by the way, this watch is a pretty new watch for me. I mean, it took years and years of collecting and getting into the world to get to this, to make a watch like that appeal to me.
But as you've grown as a collector, you've found that things that are offbeat are more appealing if they're qualitatively up to snuff.
Right, exactly. I can just tell you, a lot of people are traditional with their watches too, like thinness, thickness, all these things. They'll care about thickness, but then I'll have a watch like a Romain Gauthier that's 12 millimeters thick. Dude, that's a thick watch. Yeah.
So when you do have something like a Romain Gauthier that's very different, it's the differentness that stands out. And sometimes people perceive that as, say, thickness because it's unfamiliar. Not because it's thick, because it's unfamiliar. Right. It's a different taste.
For instance, on a supercar, what's another part of the car? You'd open the hood. You want to look at the engine. You know, you want to see like some of these mid-engine sports cars, you see the engine from the outside. Well, on a lot of these independent brands, all the flavor to see is on the top side. I mean, the backs are great too, but they do present a lot of the mechanicals on the upper side. So the eye candy there, the finishing, the inner,
the micro rotor, the escapement, all of it.
I mean, it's amazing, and to watch the escapement work all the time, it's fascinating to me. I love it. Something like the Ludovic. So the Ludovic's an interesting watch because the halftime was the first Ludovic I saw. I never saw an upside down because he had a halftime there, and I thought it was so cool that these two discs that have these mess of Roman numeral sticks on them match up right there at noon. It's pretty cool. And then I saw the upside down, the way it moves from one space to the other.
The nice thing about this watch is that because he makes only about 20 or less per year, well, I guess I should say 20 or fewer,
I think he's making 2 a month now.
Every one of them is pretty much customizable. And so you have these micro editions like yours, which is in platinum, but you've got a meteorite dial in blue.
I've actually been pretty into now meeting the guys behind the watch, meeting the guys behind the, whatever you want to call our sickness of collecting. But they're fascinating guys. It's like, you know, when you look at politicians and they say, is this guy suited to be on this committee? Well, is this guy suited to be a watchmaker? When, you know, one guy came out of this school of watchmaking, one guy came, but like a guy like
one guy's an apprentice, one guy came from a school, you know.
And most of them I've found worked for the top companies like AP or Paddock. There's a lot of fallaways from there have started their own companies. There's a company that made watches, but they hired outside watchmakers, not just the
Maître du Temps, the masters of time.
Yes.
Very similar to MB&F.
They had an art collection in there too. And my father, he was a museum director for a number of years. He brought to his museum the 3 flags from Jasper Johns. And this particular company makes it Jasper Johns dial. They have that same dial on one of their watches. But those are made by very high watchmakers, high independent watchmakers, and they're really cool. But they offer different windows, different shapes. I mean, to me, these things are just, the vision of these guys, it's so different than the realm of just, like, I find that some of the main brands now, it's all about money, making money.
But when you talk about the people, I mean, let's just be clear right here. There's no name on the dial, but this is Felix Baumgartner and Martin Frey. That's Urwerk. Max Buser is the MB of MB&F. Right. Laurent Ferrier is a real man. His name's on the dial. Ludovic Ballouard, real man, name's on the dial. Grönefeld, Tim and Bart, actually the people behind this watch. And Czapek, though he's long dead, this is made by a wonderful group of folks who are watch collectors to the core, and it's a very small and personable company.
Right, and then you look at, like, you can get into this too, like I've started to get into, like, which one of these brands is actually a genuine watchmaker as opposed to an entrepreneur or a guy who just invests in companies. So like Richard Mille is not a watchmaker.
No, he's a business executive.
He's a business executive. This guy is a watchmaker. When you meet him, you see his little factory. I mean, it's basically a room. He's making all his watches in a room, and he makes it all by himself. Some of these guys, like Laurent Ferrier, might have been he was a race car driver turned what. He might be a watchmaker, but he's not making his watches anymore.
And that's a good distinction to make, because Ludovic Ballouard, he's working basically out of a house. At one point he was making 12. He may now be making as many as 24 watches per year.
Yeah.
But the engraving on the crown is by hand. The engraving on the case back is by hand. Every part of this movement is made manually. Filing, hobbing wheels, cutting bridges, polishing and slotting and turning screws. Like, this is truly the product of a one-man band. Like what Mark Knopfler is in music,
right.
Ludovic Ballouard is for watchmaking.
Also, you think about the fact that some of these guys, like Romain Gauthier, or even Ludovic maybe, is the screws and the slots for the screws on these watches are proprietary too. So the guy is making tools to fix his watches too.
And with Gauthier, that really stands out because he is an engineer, but he's not specifically a watchmaker, so he comes at these things from different approaches. He has his own screw. It's got one slot. It's not a Phillips head, but it can take more torque without stripping than a flathead. And it prevents an idiot from trying to open up the watch, which happens more often than you'd think. So you could see that different kind of thinking reflected here. He's got his own wheel design, his own balance, his own screws. On the logical one, he had his own take on the fusee and chain that was very different from others. And so he's kind of like an auteur, even if he's not a watchmaker, his imprint is on this.
Yes. So speaking of fusee chain.
Yes.
When I was introduced to Cellini and the owner of the store showed me, he says, Tom, you got to get into this brand. And it was originally, it was the logical one by Romain Gauthier. And I thought it was so cool to see that chain on the front of that watch. So fusee chains are so cool because they're bike chains that are made, just think of making a chain that's
hundreds of pieces,
2 millimeters thick. I mean, and each chain contains a bolt and a centerpiece. And actually Romain Gauthier makes the middles with rubies. But this particular model was, the back of this watch is probably the finest looking mechanics of a watch I've ever seen in my life.
I agree with you. When people ask me who has the best finishing in the business, Ferdinand Berthoud is always on that list.
To be honest, it's humongous in there. It's beautiful. But the fusee chain is so cool. I needed to have a fusee chain. And what appealed to me with this brand was not only the back and the fact that this particular movement back has sapphire, so you can see the whole thing.
And the bridges are sapphire, so you can see down into the movement past the bridges.
And the way that he produces the conical power reserve indicator is also fascinating. And he's got a window on the side of the case.
And it's a very, as 44 millimeter watches go, it's a lugless watch.
Right.
It's the easiest thing to fit in your life.
Well, the big thing is, the old days it was all about case size. Now it's, the most important size is lug to lug. Okay?
I agree.
Because you can have these watches now that could be a 37 millimeter lug to lug, but they have these rubber straps that come out, and they actually end up being 55 lug to lug because the strap.
Yeah, the strap is so stiff it's like a hula hoop.
Yeah, exactly, and it's rolling around your wrist. But the cool part about this, they're very, the top finishing. I mean, Grubel and this company are right there with the finishing, but the octagon case shape.
Yes.
And originally, I mean, this happens to be titanium, but one of the first watches he ever made was he came out with a bronze one where they patinaed it. So I look at that like a car with a matte finish.
And just to be clear, he is Carl Friedrich Schäufele, who is the father of all the Chopard and Ferdinand Berthoud brands.
Right, and he had a dream of restarting a company that was based on marine chronometers. And all of his watches are basically marine chronometers on your wrist. He's created them the same way.
And there's a kind of a put up or shut up thing going on here, because a lot of very fine watches are sold on the basis of tradition and craftsmanship and beauty. This is a certified chronometer. This puts up rather than shuts up.
So that actually, I mean, the only 2 brands I know, or maybe 3 now, that I know that actually tell you in their manuals what their accuracy is Patek, Rolex, and Omega. And the thing about them is, if you tell them somebody it's a +2, -2 a day, they're going to hold you to that.
And they're going to make a warranty claim if it's not.
So some guys come in and they go, my watch is running 4 seconds fast. Does it mean anything? No. But the point is, you're willing to send that back to the store and have them open it up for 2 seconds? To me, that's crazy. But that run is running at 2 seconds a day.
And I have to say that of all the watches I've ever seen at trade shows or in collections, nothing has ever compelled me as much as the FB1 series to just flat out empty the tank for one watch. That's how highly I regard this and these. This is beautiful. Fusee, chain, chronometer, and as you mentioned, that incredible conical power reserve.
Right, exactly. And there's a little rolling ruby there that goes up and down. It's pretty cool.
Everything about that watch is pretty cool.
And the finishing, even every part of that finish is mirror polished and black. But the other thing about it also is when it comes to straps, that's a double rolled strap. I mean, it's also a very proprietary strap that they use, the double rolled stitching.
Yeah, where you've got actually 2 layers of leather folded over each other, almost like a brogued leather shoe.
Right.
So what I find really cool here is that you do have a guiding theme, which is white metals. When did that transition happen? Because I know you didn't start that way.
Well, I always had a fascination for just, everybody said the gold watch. It's like, that guy's a rich guy because he has a gold watch. Well, that was fine too, but sport watches to me aren't supposed to be gold, number one. Number two, it's like, you have to focus on something, in my opinion, to be a true collector has to focus on something. I mean, so I really, over the time, I've just focused on white metals. I mean, there are watches like, for instance, this Streamliner.
Yeah.
They make a Streamliner with a tourbillon with a Vanta black dial in rose gold that is stunning looking. They even have one with a jade, a Nevada jade dial.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
But it's rose gold. And the thing about rose gold is it's a beautiful material and the color combinations are awesome, but also society has already labeled you now.
Yeah. The other thing too is you wear a watch in a white metal for yourself. As soon as you introduce gold, it starts to be a little bit of pageantry.
Right.
You could love gold for its own sake, but whether you want it or not, gold is going to declare you. And as the collection becomes more elite and the watch is frankly individually more expensive, it's nice to be able to tone them down a little bit and wear them for yourself.
Right, and it's amazing how the watch industry has changed so much when it comes to material of cases. Like in the old days, it was yellow gold, then it went to rose gold. Now, white golds were hard to find, and then it was only a rhodium coated white gold. It wasn't really what they call gray gold,
Yes.
which is what they have now. I mean, like this watch collection, that's a platinum watch. People, it's even though it's a white metal, it's platinum, which is in the world of nobility.
Yes.
Is a higher noble watch, a noble case than a gold case.
It's a very frustrating material to work.
It's a dense material, but it ruins tools. It's hard to work with.
Yes.
And then now I would say the case material nowadays is either these faux like carbon materials or titanium. Titanium is rampant around the independent watch space now.
And I think part of that is discretion.
Well, that's
part of it's
actually
also
stainless
ease.
steel.
Yeah, but this guy's titanium, this guy's steel. These are both white metals alongside your platinum. So you get an element of discretion, but the focal point really becomes the dial. And what's interesting to me is that you do have dramatically open dials, Urwerk, MB&F, the Insight micro rotor. But then just as you move towards white metals, it doesn't seem there's any kind of consistent dial theme other than what you like. So I have to ask, what drove you to the Laurent Ferrier? Because it's probably the most classical of any of the dials on the table.
The case shape on that watch, the square was what got me to that watch.
Okay.
The square and that particular hue of blue.
Ice blue.
I'm not supposed to like pink, but I do like pink on dials at some point. Like I was in the PE business and I worked with children as young as nursery school kids. And when you see a new baby, You say, oh, beautiful, what is it? Well, it's in a blue suit, so it's a boy, like that kind of stuff. But pink and like periwinkle, they're beautiful colors. Now, some people have told me that like it might look good today, but could you look at that color 4 years down the road?
Okay.
So this particular watch, beyond the case shape, it was also stainless steel, which I like. I'm a stainless steel guy. I think that when it comes to, if you need to have gold, then might as well just go with gold. If you're going to do white metals, what does it matter what the material is? I mean, it is nice to have some weight. It is different with the weight of the gold, but the dial and the hands on this watch and the indices,
which are made of gold. Those are the only gold parts of the watch with the rotor.
But it's beautiful hands. I mean, it's a gorgeous watch. I've worn it to weddings, and people are like, beautiful watch. It's not Calatrava formal, but it's also a sportier formal, I think of it.
Again, like that blazer you can wear everywhere except black tie or the pool.
Right, but the real part of that watch is it's a double-sided watch. The back of that watch is absolutely incredible.
And we were talking about how Laurent Ferrier, in reference to this watch, you mentioned that he's not the one making the watch, and that's true. The movement's a collaboration with La Fabrique du Temps. There are artisans at Laurent Ferrier who finish, assemble, and regulate them. So he's more of a father figure to the brand.
Right.
But you're still getting that artisanal level of decoration because this is still a very small company, and these movements are still built on a very low volume basis.
Well, the other thing about that's a whole nother subject. I mean, like a lot of these independent guys, they don't make every part on the watch. It's sourced out to their standards. Like the cases on these, I heard a story where the Longa case.
Okay.
It's made by, well, they say it on there, whatever the house is.
Believe it or not, Longa they don't make their own cases. They have at least 3 different suppliers that make their cases.
One of them got robbed, and they stole all the cases. But along with those cases were the Grönefeld cases, because they're made by the same guy. So it held up my watch because they sold a case. But the point is, a lot of these guys, it's...
They engineered this.
Yeah,
if they're not working on... Obviously, they have helpers. They've opened up a new manufacturing building.
And the base
but
of
this
that,
is their vision.
The base of that movement is some base. I'm not sure what base it is, but the movement finishing for the price point, that's another thing, people talk... The price point on this watch...
For the Grönefeld, 8-second remontoir.
Exactly, but number one, it's only 180. They're another company that makes a number of movements, and once they make that number of movements, they stop making it.
So they made 188 movements. They launched this in 2016. I remember I was at Watch Time New York in 2019, and the word there was that they were just about done, that it was just about finished at that point.
So with this particular model, my watch retailer actually represents Gronefeld, and he came up to me because what they did was they got in coordination with Carré Vaudeline.
Yes.
And he was going to make a number of dials for this particular watch. Because they had 4 or 5 standard dials that they were making when you bought a remontoir. But this one, you had a lot of choices, so it's kind of like we kind of sat down at a table and designed that case, that dial. This particular dial is made by Carré Vaudeline, but you could get the centerpiece made by an enameler that was by, I think it was a female enameler.
Yeah. So you had a tremendous amount of options. In other words, you were part of the creation of this watch.
Yes.
And that's a big part of the experience of buying from a small brand made by independent proprietors.
Right, but that particular blue, and with the blue hands, is I can't keep my eyes off of it.
You are kind of onto something with this idea that both men and women can enjoy blue and pink. I think I see where you're coming from.
Well, the other thing, this particular model, another thing that happened was Hodinkee, like some of these internet companies or even bigger retailers can talk to the companies and get, a low volume custom made watches, like 3 or 4 watches made for them specifically. So this particular watch, on the Hodinkee model, they made, I think, 10 or 12. To make you know that it was a Hodinkee model, not only the dial, they took away the rolling
Oh, the counterweight of the remontoire, that's the best part of the watch.
They took that away on the Hodinkee one. I mean, it was a low volume made, but to me, that's why I like the watch.
And the fact that you can watch the minute hand move in steps in sync with
so
that.
That was the thing I was saying. The Hodinkee model took that away. So to me, they took some of the flavor of the watch away. But, you know, to each their own. Everybody
I appreciate that. I mean, I think you made the right choice, to be honest.
Yeah. And then with this watch, this was the first introduction into sport watches by Moser. Moser, I guess because it would have a strap and doesn't have any loom on the hands, you call them dress watches. They were known for like their dials. They had serious dials.
Dials, perpetual calendars,
right.
And for most of their early history, only precious metal cases.
Right, and you wouldn't even know there was a Moser in some cases. They didn't even put the name on the dial. But to me, the dial colors were fascinating, beautiful dial colors. But then they introduced the Streamliner, and I used to have an Ebel, by the way, in the old days. That was one of the first watches I bought. My mother bought it for me. I picked it out. It was a pre-owned watch. It was an Ebel. It was in the same shape as the one, because who made Ebel famous? Don Johnson on
Miami Vice.
Miami Vice. When I heard that the Daytona convertible cost $24,000 in 1967, I'm like, Jesus, I should have bought one.
Well, you know, it's interesting though, because you compare that wonderful organic Ebel 1911 bracelet to what was achieved here on the Streamliner, and what you've got is a lot of references to a lot of different watches, but as a whole, it doesn't plagiarize anything. It is its own thing. It's the combination of its inspirations without ripping them off.
Right. And then, you know, you have a lot of people out there that'll talk about bracelet quality on integrated bracelet watches. You know, like for instance, a 5711 has push pins. You know, an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak has screws. You know, some people would say it's harder to make a screw with a slot than it is to make a push pin. But with this actually, but the quality of the bracelet, the way it's integrated, the way it flows, the comfort of it is second to none. I mean,
and I agree with you. This feels like the armor of some sort of organic
It looks like an armadillo
creature.
almost.
An armadillo, some sort of, undersea creature perhaps, but there's no seams, you can't see light through it, it has very little lateral play, it's fluid. I agree with you about having like that single point criterion for evaluation of a bracelet. Well, does it have pins or screws? That's like irrelevant. How good is the actual feel, the fit, the tolerances? Then worry about that like one time in the entire life of the watch that you have to size it.
I mean, what people don't realize, or the new guy that's looking to buy an integrated watch is, if it has a bracelet, I want the bracelet to also be comfortable. I don't want it to like one of the things I was turned off about AP, now I had some Royal Oaks and I had them with the bracelets, but when I bought a diver with the rubber strap, the deployant buckles were so sharp edged. Like they needed to have these very tough, sharp edges on them. It bit into my wrist.
I found that too.
The other thing about this watch in particular also, I love that Fume dial, because it can last forever. It's waterproof, actually they say proof, to 100 meters, and you operate the pushers underwater.
And Moser makes that claim. That is them saying that. That's an actual thing.
And the other thing, I had a Streamliner Green Dragon, and that has the 200 series movement. This Agenor movement in here is insane. It's beautiful.
Hidden
with
rotor.
the hidden rotor, but also has a hidden Batman in there.
So now the fun thing here is that you do have some sports watches. I know you talk about sports watches being more sporty in a general sense, but when you've got something that's a screw-down crown, 100 meters plus, steel, well-loomed and automatic, I think we can safely say the Czapek Antarctique is a sports watch.
Right.
But this is far from a Royal Oak or a Nautilus. So what brought you to this brand? Because this is one of those earlier brushed steel style dials that they don't really make that much anymore.
I'll be honest with you. When these brands became too big on themselves, where you actually had to do more work to get the watch than it was worth, that's when I started looking elsewhere. And this particular model, I like the dial on that watch, the way it changes in light is beautiful. The movement is also special on that watch. Movements, the combination of the dial and the movement is a key for me. And it happens to be thin. Some people would say that's a dressier sport watch than a sport watch.
It's certainly
Because it's
more
not
compact.
it's not tool made.
No, it's not, for instance, for a diver, a driver, an engineer, a cave spelunker. But I would say a lot of the dressiness to this is just that it's very compact. It's got a micro rotor automatic by Emmanuel Boucher and Daniel Martinez. It's got a wonderfully flexible bracelet. If you don't want the bracelet, it comes with a strap. And it is a compact watch, being quite a good deal smaller than most of the other integrated bracelet sports watches out there in terms of its actual diameter. Most measurements in this case are going to find it's like a real world 38.5, 39. So I do see where you're coming from, but in terms of the capability, the screw downs, the water resistance, the lume, it's still a very credible sports watch.
That is, it is. And you know, the thing about like the difference in the Streamliner, it's also the whole shape of the case too. It's different. It's different. Like if you walk down the street with one of these watches on, chances are they'll leave you alone.
And I think there's a great lesson in there. I think, you know, we can sort of conclude on that note that to be a highly evolved and sophisticated collector, you don't necessarily need grail watches or a huge budget. You need to collect for yourself, not for others. And that is the epitome of the collector's journey. I think that's where the trail ends, when you're finally collecting watches for yourself and not for others.
Well, that's where I've come to. And that's only been in the last 5 or 6 years that I've come to that. I'm never going to collect a watch I don't like to wear. I will say that. But you're not going and buying, you know, the price that some of these watches cost, and you're not buying them unless you like them. I can tell you that right now. I mean, you know, you'd be crazy to.
Not buying them unless you like them, guys. There's a lesson to be learned there. And until next time, hey Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Time out.
Thank you.